Hey, welcome back everybody. In this video I'm going to talk a little bit about composition basics, and I'm stripping away all the excess stuff just to give everybody a clear idea of how I think of composition. So we've got three objects here and we have a ground plane. The ground plane is different than a line. I want you to think about the ground or any kind of like flat area as being a surface and not a line. Lines by themselves do not have any kind of dimension. They're just basically infinite, and there's no surface on a line. So the first thing you want to think about when you're planning a composition is to think about the horizon line and what the ground plane is going to look like. The ground plane does not have to look like a straight grid. It can be curved, it can have all sorts of different configurations, but I'm keeping this example very simple. So when you're thinking about composition, one way you can arrange these three objects to give a sense of depth is to scale one of the objects larger than the other and also position it closer to the viewer. So by putting things on a gridded surface, we can see that the blue cylinder is closer to us than the pink ball, than the green cone, right? So that's one way that you can consider depth. It's not only scale, but it's also position. Something else you can also do is you can create overlap, which is where you have one object in front of another object. This is another way of creating depth within your composition when you overlap something in front of something else. This is one way that you can overlap your objects. There's a number of combinations, of course. I'll show you just another example of that over here, where we have an object. In this case, the pink sphere is bigger, and it's also covering some of the cone and covering some of the cylinder that's flanking it, right? So overlap is a really, really important concept to keep in mind. It allows the viewer to look at a two-dimensional drawing and get a sense of depth within that 2D scene. The last thing I want to talk about is a common thing that occurs in a lot of drawings. I've been guilty of it myself. I'm sure other folks have too. It's just something you have to catch yourself on, and that's something called a tangent. And a tangent is basically something that erodes depth. So you can see that we have three objects here, and they all appear to be sharing the same edge. Like this sphere is basically sharing the same edge as the cylinder, and the edge of the cone is sharing a portion of the edge of the sphere. And so even though these objects are staggered such that the cylinder appears to be closer to the viewer, the tangent that occurs between these three objects is contradicting the depth that we want to achieve. So there are two ways that you can fix tangents. The first is you can go ahead and overlap objects. In this case, I will overlap the object. Or another way you can fix a tangent is by moving an object away and creating separation. So that's something else that you want to be aware of. And sometimes tangents in a composition can be very difficult to spot, and you just have to be aware of it as you're working. At the planning phase, you want to make sure that when you're creating your thumbnails or you're doing your sketching, that you are not having objects share the same edge. So, this is just a very, very basic explanation here. Obviously there's a lot more to composition that I want to talk about, but I figure that these are some ground rules or guidelines or whatever you want to call them that I think help us have this conversation about how do we place objects within a scene in such a way that gives us a sense of depth. So I hope you found this short video to be insightful and helpful. Obviously I've got way more to say on the subject, and I will be talking about that in future videos, but I just wanted to go ahead and put this out there for all of you to take in. So thanks again for watching. I do appreciate the new subs. Thank you so much, and I will catch you in the next video.